fundamentally, my philosophy in terms of this is that we are living out an experiment where we basically made a construct of what it is to be human. We encoded it into economic systems. Why are people feeling so alienated? Why are we so inundated? Can we handle an existence that's mainly coming through our eyes and screens? No. I think the evidence is in. It's not healthy. It doesn't create joy and connection. And in the work we're doing at GWI, we are consistently seeing the power of being in person, in real relationship, in your body.
This is Hudson Valley Storycatcher, a podcast for neighbors and dreamers to discover the heartbeat of our region through audio portraits of the people who call the Hudson Valley home. I'm Jen Lee. Right now, many of us have this sense that the systems we've built or operated inside of in the past are not serving us well in the present, and that they certainly are not going to carry the day when it comes to the futures we're living into. Lately, I've caught myself thinking for myself that I need to wait until some future moment to become part of building what comes next for us. But some people are already deep in on that project. Today, I'm speaking with Hélène Lesterlin, a facilitator, performance artist, and key voice at the Good Work Institute, where she helps guide our region toward a more regenerative, cooperative, and just economy. She brings a deeply embodied, handmade philosophy to systemic change. Hi, Hélène.
Hi, Jen.
What else should we know about you?
If you were to look at my path through life, you might be surprised by the twists and turns. And so I think one thing that helps is to know that I'm driven by curiosity and a commitment to experimentation and a commitment to the idea that as we all make our paths in life, that twists and turns are inevitable. And if we can be guided by a sense that we're bringing our best selves to our work, to the people that are in our lives, and I would say also creativity. Creativity is in everybody. And at least for me, fostering that process for others is deeply, deeply satisfying.
Well, that's a great place to begin, and a good, bird's eye view, I think, of some of your through lines that I really want to ask you more about. Your journey spans a variety of things and includes things like helping launch a $200 million cutting-edge facility like MPAC, which is the Experimental Media and Performing Arts Center at RPI in Troy, to co-facilitating the design of a community fund project with the Good Work Institute.
That is one of the projects I've been deeply immersed in at Good Work Institute the last few years. And it's great timing we're having this conversation because this week we're actually screening a documentary about this process that captures behind the scenes of it really beautifully. But the process that we co-designed and co-facilitated was in response to a question, which is what happens when you bring something like the idea of a fund into community and you actually start by asking, what if the community were to design the fund rather than coming in with it already completed and having the community come in and participate potentially after? But the design of a fund encodes many things. And sure, you could change it with community input. But we decided to really start from the beginning, which was audacious, I would say. And we had to be open to the idea that we did not know what was going to be designed. And we also committed to the idea that what was designed would be a blueprint for something we would implement. So we had our eye always on this goal of providing a pathway to the creation of a fund. What ended up happening was we facilitated 18 Kingston residents who brought all different life experiences, backgrounds to the work. They were united by their commitment to community building, a love of Kingston, and I think a kind of courageous ability to join something that was a lot of time. It was a big commitment with very little actual information about what we would be doing. They really trusted us, and it evolved over a number of years. We were really committed to the idea of embodying the shared power and leadership in the design process itself. So it really was co-designed by these 18 people. That fund design then evolved again into implementation and what is now Kingston Common Futures, which is a grant fund for the benefit of Kingston, for the people of Kingston, and the people running it are stewarding a very democratic process for the allocation of grants. And I can talk a lot more about that, but actually I'd rather people just see the film because we really get into the details of how that happened, how it emerged, and what's happening with it now that it's already completed its first year.
Well, that sounds really cool and groundbreaking. And I'm curious, as you look across kind of all these very different array of experiences that you've had in your career, what would you say are the core principles that are maybe the same or through line when you're trying to nurture true creativity, experimentation, and ambition?
I mean, I should maybe clarify that my first career was in the performing arts as a maker and a curator. So I was both, deeply involved in the creative process as an artist, but also producing with other artists their own works. So in that, I guess, 15-year period, over and over, it was deeply in my bones by the end, what is the creative process, right? What are the conditions that allow for something to emerge? And I think those things immediately I was able to recognize correlate with other types of experimentation and creation. I worked in startups. Mission-led businesses are often trying to achieve something that our current economy and society is not really built for. Sure, you want to be a for-profit business, but you also want to encode a mission within it. You're not a nonprofit, but you're also not a rapacious for-profit that's only beholden to its stockholders. So who are you? What are you? That takes a lot of creativity, and it takes a lot of risk-taking. It takes the same things that artists are doing, finding your collaborators, finding your resources, putting it all together, leading a group of people through a process in a way that really elicits everybody's best gifts and coming out on the other side with a tangible outcome. That process, I think, is familiar to anybody who's brought something from idea to reality. And certainly when we start talking about how do we create a future economy or future society, and when we start questioning the systems that we live under and actually implementing ways to start to build the new system, I think I really do subscribe to the view, and GWI is deeply rooted in this, that Wendell Berry articulates in his work, which is that it's many small things, many small experiments, a great diversity of things. I mean, an ecological metaphor is apt here. A healthy ecology is one in which there are many different kinds of flora and fauna living together in equilibrium, responsive to change. That's what we are actually looking for in building these new systems. So, I think that also spans creative work. Another part of it that I think is essential is more, I guess, like harder to put your finger on, harder to kind of generate in a plan, but it has to do with vitality. It has to do with relationships. It has to do with, why does one thing really work? Why do people kind of light up when they're working on it versus something is a real slog? And that is something that I'm very interested in. I mean, I guess you could put it in the category of like, what is healthy collaboration? But it's also almost a spiritual dimension to it. It's an energetic thing that can be quite subtle. And when it's missing, you know it. I'm not going to say the project is doomed, because you can certainly, move forward with something that doesn't feel that lively or relevant or beloved. But I do think that people are hungry for meaningful participation. They're hungry for belonging. And, at GWI, we talk about participation, belonging, and resilience as the three things that are needed as we build new systems. Resilience, because if you're trying to build something new, inevitably you hit conflict or difficulty. And how do you navigate that? These are things we're not really taught. There are very few opportunities in our mainstream culture to really embrace this sense that we could be building things that are strong together. We could be potentially taking our time to build relationships before we start to ship the product in order to make stronger, more resilient, more durable things. That is very countercultural right now. But it's certainly what grounds me in my work. It grounds the work of Good Work Institute. And I would say it often might also ground work that is on the surface, what you would put under the arts, like more ephemeral or more not as pragmatic. But I think we need those non-pragmatic things. We actually are starving for the types of experiences that creativity opens up for you. Anyway, yeah, there's more to say about that, but I'll pause there.
Yeah, I am completely just nodding my head along with everything that you're saying, because I noticed this shift in myself too, between a work that like really lights me up and makes me feel like almost instantly my whole posture changes and I lean toward it, versus another work or task that just feels like, it's something to be endured,
right?
Kind of. Yeah, I'm going to be really thinking about those three things you mentioned: participation, belonging, and resilience. One of the things you had mentioned is that earlier in your career, you had this really rich 15-year background in live dance and contemporary performance. And these feel like mediums that are really devoted to this feeling of embodiment or handmade experience in what's now for us an increasingly digital world. And so I'm curious, how does that embodied handmade philosophy influence the way that you now are facilitating community spaces, design cooperatives, and bringing people together?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think one thing that I love is philosophy. So I love that you call it a philosophy, because there's the other side of that philosophy is this idea that the mind and the body are separate.
Right.
And that somehow
they need to be connected.
Yeah. And that somehow the mind is like a computer, or it's like a device that has memory, and then you access those memories. It has skills, and then you access those skills. That can be a useful frame, of course. But I think one of the things that has caused what I'm seeing as people's unhappiness or dissatisfaction or even despair is this cutting off of our full selves and sort of prioritizing one thing, which is to be, in the words of more traditional economics, like the economic man, I'm putting that in air quotes, which is supposedly someone who makes decisions based on their own self-interest. And is only out to fulfill their needs, which include the basics, like shelter, food, all of those things. And often in that framework, it kind of cuts you off from being a fully embodied self that also has a spiritual realm, that also has a creative realm, that also has an incredibly strong need for community, connection, and meaningful activity and participation in building that community. So fundamentally, my philosophy in terms of this is that we are living out an experiment where we basically made a construct of what it is to be human. We encoded it into economic systems. We made big assumptions about what actually drives people. And I think that's one of the biggest foundational mistakes that we made as humans. And I'm talking about, capitalism and the sort of globalized economy. And you mentioned the digital age. Of course, so many of the tools that we have available to us are incredible. The ability to send someone a message across distance instantaneously is an incredible and positive thing. But then on the flip side, we've got, why are people feeling so alienated? Why are we so inundated? Can we handle this amount of information? And can we handle an existence that's mainly coming through our eyes and screens? No. I think the evidence is in. It's not healthy. It doesn't create joy and connection. And in the work we're doing at GWI, we are consistently seeing the power of being in person, in real relationship, in your body. And to circle back to your question, I was in the dance world, contemporary art world for many years. And I recently had the incredible privilege to co-facilitate a fellowship program. And we did many things as a part of that program. Much of the programming was in person. But one of the things that I think I most enjoyed as a facilitator was we were asking ourselves, how could we provide an experience to this cohort? This was 21 people that would help them step into their power physically. So when somebody's comfortable in their body, when they're great at public speaking, when they're able to walk into a room with charisma, these are things that trigger in us this sense of like, oh, this person I should pay attention to. This person's a leader, right? But how do you actually do that? How if you're an introvert and super shy, do you do that? So we were pondering different things. This was as part of a retreat, so we had full days available to us with the participants. And I was like, you know what? Let's do improvisational dance. It's a form that anybody can do. We created a structure that was a very gentle warm-up, physical warm-up, followed by groups of people following very clear instructions. It was around flocking, so how birds fly together in a flock. You just give simple instructions of how to respond to somebody else's movement, right? And it turned into the most wild, beautiful, hilarious, bonding, highly energetic 2 hours.
Wow.
Which not everyone gets to experience something like that. In fact, some people might even opt out just hearing about it, saying, oh, no, that's not for me at all.
You lost me at dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Peace out.
I am not a dancer. But this wasn't even dance. This was just awareness of the space, awareness of other people, the ability to move however you wanted, however small, however large. And to me, those types of experiences are directly related to the types of skills that we do celebrate in leaders. Confidence, presence, the ability to meet someone in the eye, see them, meet their eye, give them a real smile. These are things that can be cultivated. You can actually practice that in ways that are so joyful, so nourishing, but it requires you to show up, to be in person. And of course, there are digital experiences. There are ways to enjoy music that it's incredible what's available to us. But the power of being in the room with people, live music is not the same.
Right.
It is a different experience to share space with other human beings involved in the same activity, enjoying the same sounds. And it changes you.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. And like one of the things I'm hearing in what you're saying is this idea when you talk about kind of the philosophy that led to our current economic system is that the idea of like the quote unquote economic man or prioritizing thoughts,
Right.
and our mental thinking. But when we do that, it's like a flattening of humans, flattening of humanity, flattening of the human experience. And not only do we have like the digital forms making it easier for us to connect while being separate, alone in our different dwellings, but it also was reminding me of life at the height of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And how it felt to me to experience live music again after having so much time away from it, and how acutely I was aware of like the vibration in my body, like feeling it in my body when the drums were hit, and just feeling like, yeah, this whole body experience of like, it's not the same as just having headphones on my ears.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm really intrigued by that. It sounds like a lot of what you're doing here at Good Work Institute is trying to say like, let's bring all the dimensionality of our humanity back into focus and back into the work that we're doing. Through your work here as part of Good Work Institute, you're helping to build futures that are regenerative and just. And I'm curious, why do you feel that the Hudson Valley specifically is really fertile ground for scalable cooperatives or new economic models?
Well, I think we sometimes talk about the fact of scale because it's smaller here. It is a unique thing. So it's not as if we are only looking at Kingston. So it's not as if we're just talking about how would a small city shift, but it's this whole region of small towns, villages, rural areas. People are dispersed. People don't know each other necessarily. So we see our role as being a bit of a hub so that we can bring this work out to a slightly larger scale than it would be if we just focused on a city. So that's one thing. The other is the history of the Hudson Valley makes it particularly interesting because it has many of the things happening in larger cities or other parts of the country. So it has cities, it has different, like I said, different size towns, villages, rural, all in one place. It has an industrial past that collapsed. And so there's that kind of sense of a lost, abundance that we think is kind of part of this larger narrative. It has some of the things that, larger cities are dealing with. It has accelerating rates of gentrification. It has, a housing bubble. So there are a lot of elements here that exist on a larger scale. But because it's a smaller scale, the experiments that are happening here maybe can happen with a little more freedom or have a little bit more impact than they might have in a larger context in a larger city. I don't know. But so, yeah, it does feel like a microcosm here. It also has a history of attracting a lot of artists. Many, many artists have been drawn to the Hudson Valley for, over 100 years. And we're also obviously outside of New York City, not that far from New York City. So we benefit from the fact of being near one of the global centers, of the global economy, of the creative industries, and the people going back and forth. People and goods and services going back and forth. So that is unusual. that obviously doesn't exist in a lot of the country. So there are a lot of things here that are pointing towards a diversity of people. Politically, there are certain elements of it that seem like, oh, it's very democratic. But actually, if you look at the larger region, it's quite purple.
Yeah.
And so you're having some of those pressures or discussions across difference that I think we're having such trouble in this country having in a productive way. So that's why I think the Hudson Valley is a really interesting place right now to be experimenting with different systems, with different approaches, with different businesses, with ways to activate community. And I guess lastly, my vantage point is, like all of us, I'm in a bubble, but people are extremely willing to step forward, whether it's volunteering, whether it's curiosity about an idea. The people that I'm seeing, attending some of the things that GWI does, but also in the larger context of my life. I live up in Saugerties. Saugerties is just full of very active volunteers, community members who are building things for the community, the benefit of the community. It's a very interesting place to be at this time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just the potential for community and connection, I feel like it seems hopeful.
Yeah.
No matter where in the valley people are located.
Yeah.
So for listeners who want to learn more about the Good Work Institute or to find ways to participate or discover events, how can we find you?
Yeah, so we have a website, which is goodworkinstitute.org. Our calendar has not only things that we have coming up, whether they're workshops or events. We do author talks and screenings, and we had a big party last weekend. All of these are opportunities to meet people. We often will facilitate something light so that you can meet people you've never met before. But we also have community organizations offering events in our building, which is at 65 St. James in Kingston, and things like meditation, or there's a climate grief group that meets monthly, or there are all sorts of different events coming in and workshops that you can participate in. So yeah, you can go to our website, check out our calendar, and see what's coming. And we're on socials as well, so you can follow us there.
That's so great. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Hélène.
Thank you so much, Jen.
I'm feeling like inspired and hopeful just knowing that there are people out here working on the things that you and your team are working on here. And thanks to all of you for listening. If you'd like to support the show, consider sharing it with a friend. And you can find transcripts and show notes at hudsonvalleystorycatcher.com. Until next time, keep your heart open and your ears ready. Every neighbor has a story. I'm Jen Lee. Thank you for catching this story with me.